Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a seriously fascinating economic paradox, India's dual reality. We're looking at a nation that is generating extreme, world-class billionaire wealth at absolute breakneck speed, while at the exact same time, it's struggling with widespread, persistent poverty. It's a massive contrast, so let's break down exactly how this happens. This brings us right to our central question. Think about it. How can extreme wealth and widespread poverty coexist within the exact same borders? Is this just some glitch in the matrix, or are the mechanics of rapid economic growth really just that complicated? Well, today we're going to remain completely neutral as we dissect the hidden economic forces driving this dual reality. Okay, let's dive into this and look at the stark contrast of this paradox. On one hand, we see the staggering success of billionaires like Mukesh Ambani and Gautam Adani. These are immense, world-class fortunes. I mean, we're talking net worths that could literally single-handedly fund entire space programs. But right alongside this, we see millions struggling daily with unemployment, inadequate healthcare, and just the challenge of meeting basic everyday needs. It's basically two entirely different worlds sharing the exact same geography. To make sense of all this, here's our roadmap for today. First, the 1991 catalyst. Second, mechanisms of the divide. Third, scale and infrastructure. Fourth, frictions in governance. And finally, the path forward. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the 1991 catalyst. So to understand today, we have to step back in time a bit. Before the 1990s, the economy was heavily regulated, which meant relatively slow, bottlenecked growth. But the year 1991, that changed absolutely everything. Historic market reforms essentially swung the doors wide open to foreign investment. Multinational companies poured in, triggering this massive tech and service boom in the 2000s. And that rapid trajectory brings us right to the present day, creating a huge new middle class, vital new industries, and yes, those enormous billionaire fortunes. Moving on to Section 2, mechanisms of the divide. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the core structural driver of this inequality really comes down to one massive concept: capital versus wages. This is arguably the biggest misconception about economic growth out there. When an economy grows, people who own capital, and by that we mean businesses, lands, stocks, valuable assets, they see their wealth absolutely multiply as asset values skyrocket. On the flip side, workers who rely strictly on wages, earning an hourly rate or a fixed salary, they experience much slower income growth. The business owner's wealth is essentially multiplying while they sleep, right? While the worker's income only inches forward with every single hour they clock. So the divide becomes incredibly stark. Asset owners holding business equity or real estate ride this wave of fast exponential growth. A billionaire doesn't necessarily earn billions in cold hard cash every year. Instead, the paper wealth of their company dramatically rises. Conversely, wage workers in hourly labor, standard salary jobs, or informal employment experience very slow linear income growth. Over time, this natural structural difference creates a massive wealth gap. And hey, it's really worth noting here, this isn't just an India story. This is a global phenomenon happening all over the world. But that capital gap, it's heavily reinforced by an education gap. Because let's face it, education is the absolute strongest driver of economic mobility. On one hand, some citizens receive a world-class education, which opens doors to highly lucrative opportunities in tech, finance, medicine, and entrepreneurship. But on the other hand, millions are attending severely underfunded schools, which often limits their future strictly to unskilled labor. Because a highly skilled software engineer can easily earn hundreds of times more than an unskilled laborer, this educational disparity translates directly into severe income inequality. Furthermore, this divide is geographical. Economic growth isn't just spread evenly across the map like peanut butter, It is heavily concentrated. We see thriving urban tech hubs, cities like Bengaluru, Mumbai, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, and Pune, acting as these powerful magnets for global investment, cutting-edge technology, and high-paying jobs. Now, contrast this with rural villages, where there is still a heavy historical dependence on agriculture and informal work. One reality is highly connected to modern global markets, while the other is geographically and economically left behind, which just widens that gap even further. Which brings us to Section 3, scale and infrastructure. 1.4 billion. I want you to just take a second and let the sheer magnitude of that number sink in. That is more than the populations of North America, South America, and Europe combined. When you operate at this scale, just providing the physical volume of resources required becomes an astronomical task. So The crucial point is that even with rapid, historic economic growth, spreading those benefits across 1.4 billion people is a monumental logistical hurdle. Creating enough physical schools, building enough hospitals, paving enough roads, and generating enough sustainable employment for that many individuals, that takes a staggering amount of time. Lifting millions out of poverty and managing this massive shift toward urbanization means that even when the economic engine is absolutely booming, the benefits take decades to actually trickle down through such a massive demographic layer. Next up, Section 4, Frictions and Governance. Now, it is absolutely crucial to acknowledge that the narrative isn't just the rich getting richer. And this brilliantly illustrates that point. Tangible progress is happening. Over the last few decades, millions upon millions of people have gained brand new access to electricity, paved roads, official bank accounts, and mobile phones. Poverty is definitively falling. This is a developing nation making substantial progress, even if millions are still struggling. Yet that progress is often bogged down by specific governance frictions. Experts continuously point to systemic issues like corruption, extensive bureaucratic delays, and policy inefficiencies. When development programs are unevenly implemented, or when infrastructure projects take years longer than planned, the resources intended to help the poorest citizens simply do not reach their targets efficiently. These neutral facts of governance act as severe friction, right? They essentially slow down the poverty reduction that the economic engine is actively trying to generate. Finally, Section 5, the path forward. A lot of debate out there centers around whether billionaires are the problem or the solution, but the reality is highly nuanced. Ambitious entrepreneurs are absolutely necessary to create jobs, pay vital taxes, and build infrastructure. Let's move to the ultimate takeaway and see how this builds. The goal isn't necessarily fewer billionaires. It's ensuring that future economic growth becomes vastly more inclusive. It's about creating a system where prosperity inevitably reaches every single corner of the country alongside that immense wealth creation. Which leaves us with a final provocative thought. Does the country need a fundamentally different model to reduce inequality faster? How exactly does a developing nation balance extreme wealth creation with the moral imperative to eradicate poverty? It's an incredibly complex puzzle, for sure, but understanding these forces is the very first step. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.